everybody! A little while ago I received the Nook kit to make a little train carriage, and I did an unboxing video, and I had a lot of comments saying please can you post the next part so that we can see how this turns out. So in this video I will be doing the next part of the train carriage and seeing how easy it is to put together so that you can have a look yourselves and see if it's something that you'd enjoy doing. So previously I got up to this stage where I'd put some of the wooden parts together. It had taken me a couple of hours to do, and I found that once you get started it's really hard to stop because you really get absorbed in what you're doing. And today I'm up to this point where I need to be adding the little backdrop that moves when the motor is switched on. So with the kit there were these 3 backdrops. At first I was confused because I didn't know if there were 3 different parts, but actually you just choose the one you want, or you can go online to their website and it says there's more to download. And there's also some information about how to create your own backdrop, which really interests me, and that is something that I am considering doing. But for now I've chosen this middle backdrop here because I like the countryside and I like the little train station, so I like the mixture of different environments in it. So I cut my chosen backdrop out with scissors and I did it really carefully. I do have a guillotine, but it doesn't really cut in a straight line, so there wasn't much point in using that. I studied the instructions for a little while at this point, just because this structure is quite detailed now and it's quite small on the instructions, but I was trying to work out to see if I had to push this piece of paper through every slot on each corner. So far up to this point I had found that the instructions were really clear because the pictures are really helpful. But obviously this piece of paper has to slot through one slit and around the back, and so it's harder to see on the instructions the bit where it goes around the back. But I did work out that it goes through each bit on the corner and just pulls around like this. Here I was just double checking the instructions just to make sure that it was meant to go through each slit. I didn't want to do it wrong. I'm still not 100% sure that I've done it right, but I'm hoping that I have. I found that the piece of paper that this backdrop had been printed on was really thin, and I was worried as I was pulling it through these slits that I was going to rip it. So you can see here I'm being quite gentle as I'm pulling it through. So the next step was to join here. Now then, as I just said, the paper was really thin, and I found that as I pulled it I was creasing it. And also, as I pulled it, it was really tight, and I'm assuming it has to be really tight so that it moves when the motor's switched on, but this made it difficult to get the join correct. As you can see, I was finding this bit difficult. Every time I managed to pull it tight enough, I couldn't actually press the 2 pieces of paper against each other so that they would stick. So I had to think of a solution. Every time I thought that I'd got there and that the 2 pieces of paper were in the correct position, when I released my grip, they kind of came away from each other again because I hadn't managed to press them together properly. You can really see here how creased it was getting. So I decided, rather than using my Pritt stick, to try using double-sided tape in the hope that the 2 sides would grip together by themselves when they touched each other. However, this proved equally as fiddly because I had nothing to press against, and so the top was gripping and the bottom wasn't. It wasn't making a nice seal. So I decided that I needed to put something behind here so that when the two pieces of paper, or the two ends, were positioned correctly, I had something to press against. So as you can see, I took a lollipop stick and I put it behind the edges so that I had something to press against. I then switched to using a larger lollipop stick, just so that I had a bit more surface area to work with. I thought I was getting somewhere, but then it ripped. This was because I was having to pull it so much. It was getting creased, the paper I think was getting weaker and weaker the more I pulled it. And I was disappointed because this was the backdrop that I wanted. Thankfully there were the two spare ones. So I cut out a new one and thought, let's start again. I definitely now think I'm going to make my own backdrop, because actually then it means that this hasn't all gone so wrong. Everything happens for a reason. Maybe it ripped because I was meant to have my own bespoke backdrop. So that's something that I'll do in a future video. But for now I'm going to put this one in place. I am hoping that I can switch it later. I managed to seal this one more easily, and I think that's because I had had so much practice with the first one, but I did have a little line where I didn't quite overlap it properly, so you could see some of the double-sided tape. But never mind, I am going to switch it at some point. So on to the next step. The instructions said that I had to take one of the elastic bands and loop it through some parts of this wooden structure. Now, this elastic band was not as stretchy as I'd hoped. I did stretch it a little bit to try and make it a little bit more elasticy, but it had to run through here, through this hole, down here, and then it had to hook over these little teeth. I'm calling them teeth, that's my word. I don't know if that's really what they're called. And it had to come all the way through. It was a bit daunting pulling this elastic band through this far. It was a bit like blowing up a balloon and not knowing when to stop. I didn't want it to snap. But anyway, I managed, and it's now in place. And on to the next step. So I was quite surprised because I went from that stage to going straight into making little benches to go inside the train carriage. I'd expected that I might get an opportunity to actually try the motor and see that the backdrop worked. In a comment on my previous video, it said that someone had tried their motor at this stage and it hadn't worked, so the backdrop didn't spin. I am nervous that mine's not going to work as well. But actually, I'd spent so long on that backdrop, I did feel ready to do something different, a different part of this book nook. So let's just keep our fingers crossed and hope that that backdrop does work when it comes to that stage. So, for the little benches, I had to take some of the wooden pieces and also some of the pieces that wear this gold foil. This gold foil is sticky back, which is nice, and you've got to really precisely stick it to these tiny pieces of wood, which are very thin, so it's quite hard to line it up accurately, but I think I managed it okay. Now you have to do this on both sides, and also there are 6 pieces to do. So it took a little bit of time, but actually it was quite a relaxing job to do. I really liked the fact that the gold foil already had its adhesive on it, so it meant that I didn't have to use glue. I think if I'd have had to have used glue, because the wood was so thin at this point, it would have been quite tricky to do it neatly. Before moving on, I just smoothed the foil down to make sure that there were no air bubbles, and this is what the pieces looked like with the foil on both sides. So I had a quick tidy up and then read the instruction manuals for the next step. The next step was a very similar task where I had to stick the foil to more wooden pieces, and this is to make the base and the back of the benches for the train carriage. You might have noticed there that I was using a nail file just to smooth down some of the edges of the wood. So these little pieces hook on to the bigger pieces like this, and I positioned them like this at first, and then I got my glue and stuck them into place. It was then time to gather together the next pieces, and these were going to make the little seat pads, but I struggled to find all of the pieces. So all of these pieces are numbered. I found a spare parts sheet, which I hadn't noticed before, but eventually I found the pieces. They're just not all in order, they're not all in numerical order. So at this point here, I made a mistake. Uh-oh. So I had attached the wooden bits together as the instructions told me to, and that was easy. And then I had to get these pieces of sort of leather-like material, and they were also sticky back. But can you see this gap here? So one of them overlaps and one of them had a gap, and I was sure that they were meant to be identical. When I checked the sheets of material, I noticed that their numbers were different. So the two pieces that I'd selected, even though they looked almost identical, they had different numbers next to them. But the numbers were so hard to see on this because they were tiny. So anyway, I found this little scrap and I patched it up. And I hoped that the piece that I had used wasn't going to be missing. Well, it was definitely going to be missing for a future piece, but I hoped that I could patch that up too. So you can see, if you look really carefully, that they are different. My cat, at all points here, was actually on my knee, so I was reaching over her to do every bit. I don't know if you can see the score marks on this piece of material, but basically that's the bit that was different. So I seem to be missing some video footage here, but I then stuck the little details on, and this is where I'm up to. What do you think? I think they're super cute. I don't know what the next step is. I'm intrigued to see, because I think it's interesting how it jumped from making sort of the internal mechanism to suddenly making these bits. So please do join me for my next video. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and thank you so much for watching.